Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we complete day 5 of a 5-day program on the challenges of democracy in the United States. Good morning, Danny.
Morning, Jimmy.
Turn off your video, put yourself on mute, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
You got it.
Good to see you. As it turns out, synchronistically, this week, as we've been thinking about the challenges of democracy in the United States, is also the 530th anniversary of the landing of Columbus in the Bahamas in the week of October 12th, 1492. We commented on the fact that when Columbus set foot in what they called the New World, what he brought with him was a toxic combination of patriarchy, racism, and Christian dominionism. And that toxic mix, combined with the military power of the European states, conquered the Western Hemisphere very quickly and set in motion a genocide that within 100 years wiped out 90% of the entire indigenous population in the northern, central, and southern hemispheres. Part of that process was the founding of the United States and other countries that continued the toxicity against the indigenous people, began slavery. And the irony of ironies is that the democracy that began to be framed by the United States, the ideas that generated that democracy, didn't come from Europe. It came from the native peoples that the Europeans so viciously conquered. And I'd like to just dwell on that a little bit more because I want to make a very important point in my mind that the challenges to democracy that we are witnessing and taking on today are symptoms, not causes. Think of Trump, you think of the authoritarianism that's gripped the Republican Party, the racism, the white supremacy, the Christian dominionism. These are deep in the psyche of the American polity. And the chickens are coming home to roost. And I want to just read just a few sentences from the dialogues that as I told all of you yesterday, they've actually tracked the origins of the history of how the Native Americans shaped European thought. And it started in 1683 with a French aristocrat called Lahontan, who joined the colonial service, went to North America, to around the area of Lake Huron, was fascinated by the indigenous peoples, learned several of their languages, and in the course of his explorations, came across an extraordinary Native American warrior, statesman, strategist, and chief called Condirarok, who was so brilliant and so articulate that he challenged the French and also the British to dialogues on appropriate governance. There's indications that Condirarok actually went to Europe and spent some time in Europe in the court of Louis XIV. And what happened was Lahontan wrote this down, and it was published as a dialogue with the savage. And I want to read you just a couple of comments that Kandiaronk makes to Lahontan, which seeded a revolution in the thought forms of the European intelligentsia that gave rise not only to the Enlightenment, but to the revolutionary fervor that gripped Europe through the French and American revolutions. Lahontan is talking about the need for punishment and the need for coercive force, and that if you don't punish people, they won't be good. That's the European way, he said. And Kandiaronk says, for my own part, having been there, I find it hard to see how you folks can be more miserable than you already are. You have observed that we lack judges. What is the reason for that? Well, we never bring lawsuits against each other. And why do we never bring lawsuits? Because we have made the decision neither to accept or make use of money. And why do we refuse to allow money into our communities? The reason is this: we are determined not to have laws, because since the world was a world, our ancestors have been able to live contentedly without them. And he points out that France and Europe could not maintain the coercive power of money without the coercive power of the state, because money, Kandiaronk observed, is what creates disparity and destroys equality in the public sector. Kandiaronk also says, I have spent 6 years reflecting on the state of European society, and I still can't think of a single way that they act that is not inhumane. And I genuinely think that this is only the case as long as you Europeans stick to your distinctions between mine and thine. I affirm that what you call money is the devil of devils, the tyrant of the French, the source of all of your evils, the bane of souls and the slaughterhouse of the living. Do you seriously imagine, he says, that I would like to live as one of the inhabitants of Paris, to take 2 hours every morning just to put on my shirt and makeup, to bow and scrape before every obnoxious galoot I meet on the street who happened to have been born with an inheritance? Do you really imagine I could carry a purse full of coins and not immediately hand them over to people who are hungry that I meet on the way? That I would carry a sword but not immediately draw it on the first band of thugs I see rounding up the destitutes to press them into naval service? And he goes on. Those dialogues became bestsellers. And all of a sudden, the French intellectuals, the German intellectuals, the British began to have an unprecedented conversation around human rights, about equality, about money. And a series of dialogues were written, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Rousseau, that culminated in a whole new way of thinking based on what had been originally seeded by the Native Americans they were proceeding to conquer. It was Rousseau, for example, and his great masterwork that ignited the French Revolution that took on Kandiaronk's critique of mine and thine, and said that the original sin, agreeing with Kandiaronk, was the notion of private property. So I just want to bring these issues and substrate considerations into our dialogue about democracy and the election coming up, with the assertion that I think is worth discussion, that it is not unless and until we transform the American psyche and cleanse it of the patriarchal, racist, Christian dominionist toxicity that has shaped and distorted our constitutional republic from before the beginning, that we will have any hope of saving democracy as we know it. Because what Plato said 2,500 years ago, I think is beginning to come to pass when he says that democracies ultimately conclude in tyranny because they never figure out a way to resolve the basic dysfunctions that gave rise to their origin in the first place. And we as Americans, I think, have some serious thinking to do around these issues that Kandirmak and other Native Americans brought to our attention 400 years ago, if we're going to preserve even a semblance of the democracy we seem to be so proud of, but are on the brink of losing. With those thoughts in mind, let us just take a moment and breathe together. These are heavy issues. They assault the soul. They challenge us in very fundamental ways. And before we dive into our program and invite our speakers, let us just take 2 minutes. When you hear the sound of the bell, breathe in, and you'll breathe for about 5 seconds in. And you hear the sound of the bell and you'll exhale. If you do that on a regular basis, you vitalize your spirit and calm your soul, and are better able to take into consideration these deep issues that require urgent attention in the American citizenry. Thank you, everyone. Georg. Thank you, everyone. It's good to breathe together, knowing that the whole universe breathes together. It's my great pleasure now to introduce my good friends and colleagues, John Steiner, and who with his wife, Margot King, have been passionate defenders of democracy and networkers for democracy for many, many years. And also George Caponelli, who is the founder of Age Nation, has been convening a number of panels on the issue of democracy in the United States in particular, but we also are very aware that democracy is under assault in many countries around the world. So that is one of the reasons why we've been highlighting this issue as often as we have on Humanity Rising. So John, George, welcome, and I turn the program over to you and your panelists.
Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everyone. This is I think our 42nd program on democracy in the last 7 or 8 months. And we began this series to bring to the attention of you, the voter, you, the citizen, the work that's being done and has been done for a long time by an extraordinary group of people, experts, activists, candidates, office holders, attorneys, people who are behind the scenes, like John and Margot, who have over the years been incredible advocates and supporters for the work that needs to be done. We also convened it because it was our understanding, and it's still our belief, that the midterms are the time when, frankly, the whole game is on the line. That we want to give you as many different opportunities to be involved, to be engaged, to support, and to do what can be done to make it possible in November. We all know that America is not by any stage a perfect democracy. And as our guests today, who've been in the trenches and on the front lines for so long, can easily attest to, that's a clear fact. At the same time, if we don't do our job in November, just less than a month away, we're not going to have a chance to revisit any of the things that Jim talked about. That's why the title of this week's series is that it's all on the line. In order to move toward a more perfect union, in order to revisit, refine, restructure what needs to be done, we first have to have even the semblance of the tattered remains of democracy to work from. And that's when the job should really begin. But first, let's work on saving democracy, or what's left of it. I don't know about you, but I'm just damn tired of listening to the nonsense and the maliciousness and the foolishness and the stupidity of people that are trying to walk backwards into the future. Today they call themselves MAGA Republicans. They've been called other things over time, but it is clearly a condition that we must address and deal with if we're to have any chance of creating a world in which each of us gets to do the things that we have truly come here to do. Constructive, positive, imaginative, remarkable things. So today we're going to take a look at that with some wonderful people. John, do you have some opening comments you'd like to make?
I think what you and Jim have said is great. It's a pleasure to have you guys on, and several really old friends. Keep going, George.
Well, thanks. So Daniel Sheehan, Harvard College, Harvard Law School, Harvard Divinity School, trained constitutional litigation and appellate attorney. He's been a champion for close to 5 decades. Public speaker, college professor, author, on and on and on. But the bottom line is a line in his biography that I think says it all. He's protected the fundamental and inalienable rights of our world's citizens, and has elucidated a compelling and inspiring vision for the future direction of our human family. He's done that in some of the toughest cases that you all are aware of, or most of you are aware of. The Pentagon Papers, Watergate, the Silkwood case, the Greensboro Massacre, the Lepenka bombing, and work with a number of the tribes, especially the Lakota people. Been a champion for a long time. Danny, welcome.
Thank you very much, George. We appreciate being here.
John?
I think I get to introduce Harvey, but I have to see where I put his bio. Okay, Harvey, old friend. Here we go. Harvey Wasserman is truly one of our country's most committed, passionate, indefatigable citizen activists for now more than 50 years. He's an American journalist, American historian, and author in the great spirit of Howard Zinn, a democracy activist, and an advocate for renewable energy. He's been a strategist, organizer, and one of the founders of the anti-nuclear movement in this country, going back to the 70s. And if I'm correct, Harvey, you coined the phrase "no nukes."
Well, I helped. It was a group effort.
All right. Groups are important. I'm going to change to you now since you're here. You perhaps know as much or more than anyone about all of the aging, dangerous nuclear reactors in our country. And as we'll hear, you continue to fight for taking them offline. Back to he. Who this is? He, you, has been a featured speaker on many national TV shows, a senior advisor to Greenpeace and the Nuclear Information Service. And I was part of this, at least watching you guys do it, as you, in your role as an investigative reporter with your senior editor at the Columbus Free Press, Bob Furtakis, you guys brought evidence to bear that the 2004 election was stolen. Never completely proven, but pretty close. Your work prompted Reverend Jesse Jackson to call you and Bob the Woodward and Bernstein of that election. And as Harvey has put into chat, and you're going to hear more about today, there is now a team with Harvey at the helm as host and convener, a remarkable weekly Zoom gathering on defending democracy and protecting our climate, which is now in its 114th week. We'll hear more about that as we proceed. Harvey, it's a pleasure and an honor to welcome you, old friend and colleague and ally, along with Danny and Linda, who I don't know as well or as long. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you. No nukes.
Harvey, before we go further, would you say a few words, please, about the outstanding work that Linda does?
Well, Linda Seeley's been a mainstay of the Mothers for Peace, one of the great organizations in San Luis Obispo that has kept the faith fighting the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. And I got to say, you know, in the worldwide struggle to evolve as a species past nuclear power, there's no more important fight right now than the Diablo Canyon fight. They're trying to extend operations at this insanely dangerous, uninspected, uninsured piece of radioactive madness. And Linda, who I know as Seeley, has been a sister and a fabulous activist for all these years. And with Jane Swanson and others in San Luis Obispo has, you know, it's been basically local women who have powered the anti-nuclear movement at its most basic. And Linda Seeley is the quintessential example of that. And without her and women like her, we'd all be dead, basically, because there'd be way more nuclear plants. And as Danny knows, we need to shut these two reactors, and we need to go. There are 1.5 million solar powered homes with rooftop panels on them in California. We need to make that times 10, and then maybe we'll save the world. So Linda is really right at the cutting edge, and it's an honor to be with her.
Thanks very much, Harvey. I'd like to begin, Danny, if you're willing. We understand we're in trouble. We understand this is a time of extremes. If you had to define what it is that you ask of the citizens of this country during the next 30 days at least, how would you frame that?
I would say that every single one of us has to reach out to the individuals that are on our network of communications that we have and get them. Sarah and I were talking about this just yesterday, that ask each one of them to reach out to at least 5 of their friends who they know are either not registered or may not vote in this particular election. Because what we have to try to overcome is this kind of fatalistic conclusion that, well, it's absolutely inevitable that the Republicans are going to take back the House of Representatives, and the odds are 66% that the Senate is going to be held by the Democrats, and so therefore we don't really have to bust our butts to do anything. That what we've got to do, as Sarah was pointing out yesterday, we've got to mobilize at least 5 or 6 of our friends who are in that kind of state of mind and bring them to bear. Now there are also certain very specific districts and states that we want to reach out to. Use the people in our networks that are in certain of these states. We've identified our office, the Romero Institute, and our 501c4, the Christic Institute, have identified 9 or 10 very major congressional districts around the country where the difference is going to be made. As of right now, we all realize that the Democratic Party certainly isn't perfect. It isn't the vehicle that's going to save the world right now, but we do have to prevent the extreme right-wing controlled Republican Party from getting control of the House of Representatives, much less the Senate. And there are about 9 or 10 key congressional districts around the country that are right now that are anticipated to be taken over by the Republican Party, primarily because of the gerrymandering the state legislatures have done in those states. And we need to work to try to focus on those districts, reach out to people in those districts and try to get them to bring other people to the polls to turn those away from being taken over. And there's a few seats that the Democratic Party is capable of taking away, a few of those. It's going to be that close. The Democrats presently hold a 9-seat majority in the House of Representatives. They're expected to lose the House right now if nobody does something more radical over the next month, and that they're going to end up with 7 to 9 or 10 at least additional seats. So we know what the details are here, and so we have to get down to the granular and reach out to people in our networks in those particular districts and try to get them to mobilize their friends and neighbors who they think are going to be supportive of at least the Democratic candidates. That's all we can do right now, but we've got to do that. So that's my judgment right now.
Danny, and before we move on to Harvey, George, to answer your question, can you put that information in our chat of those specific congressional districts you feel are so important?
Sure, I can.
John, also just one pause here. In addition to what Danny has said, I want to stress the fact that I'd like you as a viewer, as a listener, not only to pay attention to what Danny has said about where the accent needs to be and the focus, but imagine the next 2 years with the Republicans in control of the House. how many things they are going to try to unwind, how many millions of dollars they're going to waste on phony congressional hearings, attempts to impeach Biden and obstruct America again and again and again. And if that's what you want to live through, keep your body at home or don't open your mouth and talk to your friends and encourage them to vote, because that's the crime that we're going to have to live through for the next couple of years if we don't do the things that Danny has suggested. John, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, Harvey, over to you for the same question from George.
Well, Danny got it exactly right. And Danny's been a guest on a presenter on our Monday Zoom calls. I want to strongly urge all of you to sign up and join us on Mondays, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and everything in between. We have been discussing since April of 2020 the desperate need to shift progressive and the campaigning to grassroots organizing. And we did bring together Ray McClendon of the Georgia NAACP, the political director, with Andrea Miller, who is the founder of the Center for Common Dreams, to come up with a formula in Georgia in 2020 and 21 that put to a Democratic black man and a Democratic Jewish guy into the U.S. Senate from the state of Georgia. As a historian, I can tell you that's an impossible feat. But what we need is a new paradigm here, which we've worked out the basics of the kind of grassroots organizing that can win and help us keep the House and win the Senate. The formula of the gerontocracy that controls the Democratic Party to pour tens of millions of dollars into TV advertising, from which their $1 million consultants get a fee, is failure. And the good news, the basic difference between America in 2022 and Germany in 1931 or 33 is that in this country, the people are with us. The majority of the American electorate now was born after 1980. These are the millennials and the Zoomers. They are generally not distracted by issues of racism and homophobia, but they have a much deeper understanding of the need to defeat climate change and to convert to renewable energy and to organic agriculture. Those are the basic tools of the struggle here. And we know that with grassroots organizing, we can win at a tenth the cost of the Democratic Party likes to spend on TV advertising. So to accomplish what Danny has just said and hold the House and Senate and even get a better, hopefully a real majority in the Senate, has to involve the shift of the funding that the Democratic Party takes and squanders on TV advertising and put it into grassroots organizing and relational organizing and face-to-face campaigning and community democracy centers. And unfortunately, nobody understands this better than Steve Bannon, who has been doing it from the right, taking over elections, as he says, taking over precincts, election boards, secretaries of state, in other words, the nitty-gritty of the mechanics of the elections. So it's not only a question of getting out the vote, which we have to do through grassroots organizing, but we also have to guard every ballot box and every precinct and every election board. And that's the new paradigm that we have to use to win here. And so come on with us, please. It's www.grassrootsep.org on Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. John has been on many, many times, Danny Seeley, and join us in this campaign to flip the paradigm. And I will say, a week from Monday, on I believe it's the 28th, or some. I'm not sure the day, but a week from this coming Monday, we will have Jamie Raskin on with us, and he will give us guidance on the things, some of the things we need to do. So please do join us. Email me directly. If you email me directly at solartopia@gmail.com, I'll send you a free PDF of my People's Spiral of U.S. History, which basically is Howard Zinn's book, 40 years later on LSD. So please join us, and please do come on, and thank you. We can win, and we can even beat the big money, but it's got to be done with a different a grassroots paradigm of organizing.
Harvey, did you put those links in the chat?
I'm going to put my email in once again. People should write me directly. It's solartopia@gmail.com. And I will take care of it from there. If you write me directly, I'll send you back a PDF of the People's Spiral, and I'll send you the link to Monday's call. More pedestrian, I put it in there, Grassroots EP for election protection, grassrootsep.org.
Great, thanks. Linda, to you.
Oh, this conversation has been really making me think about nukes, capitalism, the way that all of the money that's been put into reviving all of these old nukes and the grassroots efforts that the pro-nuke people have been utilizing to change the attitudes toward nuclear power in the young. It's extraordinarily concerning to me, because what they have done is that they have switched the conversation. Right now, you and I, Harvey, you, me, we're considered dinosaurs, scaredy cats. Like, we don't understand about this wonderful carbon-free technology that can help us fight climate change, And I've been having some conversations lately with university students, and that's what they're being taught. And it goes along with this whole kind of the Steve Bannon technique of getting in there early, getting in there to the schools. Like for instance, in California, the schools, in the public schools, they're offered a free module on nuclear power by the utilities, PG&E and Southern California Edison, who give science teachers a module that's completely prepared with test questions, blah, blah, blah. So the science teachers don't have to do anything. They can, this is an approved module by the California Board of Education, or whatever it's called, the overseeing board, the oversight board. And so they can insert this into the educational system when the kids are like, they don't know anything about it. And they're like, oh, wow, this sounds really good. And then there's also the part about nuclear medicine, and nuclear medicine is, it helps people. They kill cancer with it, et cetera, et cetera. So that has given it a very positive spin. And so we're facing this situation where, through ignorance and through selective information, that the general public is now thinking, well, nukes aren't so bad. Look, nobody died at Fukushima, is what they say all the time. The coal industry has killed millions of people. What have nukes done? And that's what they say. So it's really, really, really important for us to get to the grassroots, back to the grassroots with our anti-nuclear work. And the business about keeping Diablo Canyon open is, I want to say one more thing about capitalism. they have a tremendous amount of money, the pro-nuke people. And they're using it, wisely. They're making good investments for their own purposes. And what it's doing is taking away people's critical thinking skills. And so our challenge is more than just a matter of, getting Diablo Canyon shut down. This is sort of, it's a very fundamental battle. I hate that word battle, but struggle that we're in here. And I think that the way the nuclear power issue goes is a huge indicator of the way that our history will flow. So though I'm very involved in Diablo Canyon and trying to get this insanity stopped, my concern goes a lot bigger than that. And so I think it's really important for us to organize ourselves and to get young people into this anti-nuclear movement, because we are severely lacking in the young.
Linda, I want to say two things about this. One is I think that in a fascinating tangential way, you've answered George's question or given an answer to it, because as bad as some of our Democrats are, and we know that, including Gavin Newsom in your state of California, who may well run with the nuclear industry behind him, it's still better than if the Republicans take back the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
And so as we've said, and we know, every single issue that's on the table is going to be affected by democracy. Second thing I want to add that I saw yesterday, the MacArthur Foundation gave one of their Genius Awards to a pro-nuke young woman advocate. And if you go on, because it gives a list of who the Genius Awards are, but I think sadly that's a reflection of exactly what you're saying. And we can get into that more, Harvey, on one of your shows, but this kind of inextricable connection between climate, our history, and democracy is totally on the table in this election.
A next question, John, that you might have, please.
Harvey, I think what you alluded to when you were speaking earlier and it's happening but not enough, of how much money goes into ads and how much we're brainwashed to put money directly often into candidates and not to what you have called, and the Georgia way calls, relational organizing, is critical to what's happening on the ground. And it could and may make a difference in 2022, but is going to be even more important as we go forward. And I'd love to hear you say a little more about the work of Ray McClendon and Andrea Miller, the Georgia Way. But again, it's how do progressives who tend to understand this more than corporate Democrats and certainly Republicans. And again, Danny, I think it's what you're talking about. Small groups of us don't know how important we truly are. So if you would just kind of talk about relational organizing and it's important for this election and as we move forward.
Well, let's look at the Virginia election that followed the Georgia election. Now, the Democrats had a corporate guy running against the Republican corporate guy who was, a Trump guy, but in corporate veneer. And the Democrat refused to pay his door knockers. And, whereas Andrea Miller at the Center for Common Ground and Ray and others, Ray McClendon in Georgia, they pay their grassroots organizers $20 an hour. People knock on doors. People stand at street corners and shake hands. They have barbecues. They have public events. They have established in neighborhoods, storefronts, so that people can visit and press flesh. And there's only so much. I mean, I watch Colbert and I watch Jimmy Kimmel, and night after night they pummel these guys on the right, and still they stand. I mean, Dr. Oz is a complete, I don't have to tell you, is still close to Fetterman in Pennsylvania. All these people in previous eras, Herschel Walker, that you think would just go away, are propped up by millions and millions of dollars. And it no longer matters to the right wing if their candidates are liars or thieves or criminals. They just get the money and they keep going. And as long as that paradigm is dominant, and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Steny Hoyers of the world do not step aside for the younger people, the AOCs and the Squad and so many others who understand, the younger generation who understand their lives are on the line, then we're not gonna win. And I think to really understand the dilemma that we're in with the Democratic Party, we have to look at the Clinton administration. When I worked 50 years on my history book, the hardest part of writing the People's Spiral of U.S. history was writing about the 8 years of the Clintons. They were an absolute catastrophe. And people have rightfully lost faith in the Democratic Party, and yet here we are having to work to elect Democrats. That is the key dilemma we face. And what we have to do to save this country is to flip, as Danny well knows, because he's working with AOC, we have to flip the millennials and the Zoomers to take control of the Democratic Party on a grassroots basis. You and I and everybody else on this call get 8, 10, 12 pleas for money every day. None of the money should be going to the Democratic Party. It needs to go to the grassroots organizers. And so we put together a handbook that came out of Georgia, 2020 and 21. And, and we know that the opposition understands this. Steve Bannon, the evil genius of the right wing, has been doing this for years now. We have to guard the election, guard the election places, and do the door knocking and make sure that the canvassers are paid, for God's sakes.
So Harvey, just to follow up on that, where can anybody who's on this call give money now that can still make a difference in a few weeks?
Okay, well, we give out money through grassrootsep.org. We have a 501c3. I'll put in the chat in Columbus, Ohio. Center for Common Ground and Georgia NAACP. Ray McClendon proposed a $1.5 million budget, which is peanuts, compared to what the Democrats get, that he could use on a grassroots basis that could win Georgia and get rid of this idiot of these people. So, we know how to do it. So I'll put the
Harvey, before you do put anything more in the chat,
okay.
Switch at the bottom where it says hosts and panelists to everyone, because your previous postings are to us, but not to the viewers. So, okay.
I'm going to put to all you folks out there, I'm going to put my email first. And like I say, I'll send you a free PDF and I'll link you up. And then I'll tell you where to put the donations.
And then, Danny, anything more that you'd want to amplify, anything that's Harvey has said, because you're always so plugged in at this kind of grassroots relational level, as well as at a litigious level.
Well, it's going to be absolutely critical. One of the major problems, like we spent here in the Romero Institute this past year, we spent an entire year working with the Democratic Party in the state legislature to try to pass some sort of a comprehensive California Green New Deal. And the problems that we kept encountering were that, you can't do that. that's too much. You're asking for too much. But let's not rile up the citizenry. Let's not spend a lot of time and energy mobilizing people and individuals and getting them to get in the streets and start demanding, climate change legislation. Let's just work with the people in the elite circles of the Democratic Party. And the problem is that they just keep whittling down everything that you're trying to get done because they do not want to alienate the wealthy and in fact, the oil companies that are putting money into their campaigns. And so that this is a challenge, that what we need to do, it isn't that we don't need to work with the people that are in the regular Democratic Party, but we need to mobilize regular citizens. We need to get out into those districts. I remember back in 1972 when I was in New York at the big Cahill law firm there, and I went over into the 14th congressional district, which is now AOC's district. But at that time, John Rooney was the congressman from there, who was a hardcore right-wing, total reactionary Democrat. And everybody said, oh, it's a waste of time trying to go there and get McGovern. I went over there to try to get McGovern to win the primary. But we went in there, and as Sluggo was pointing out, set up storefronts inside the 14th congressional district, went around and got people to volunteer the area for us, went around and got volunteers to come and work. Went to every one of the PTA meetings, the veterans meetings, the fire people. We went and met with everybody, and they were so happy to actually see people come and talk with them, on behalf of a candidate and discuss the issues that you when you get to meet them and talk with them and impress them that you really care about them, they'll vote for the candidates that you're really representing. This is an extraordinarily important dynamic of democracy. And people have been trained into believing that democracy is a spectator sport, that we just have to watch the major elite leaders deciding who the candidates are going to be. And then all we get to do is vote for, the red team or the blue team. We've got to get out into the streets. That I think most importantly, what we're working on right now in the Christic Institute, the 501c4 and the PAC, is trying to generate an entire national cabinet to figure out who the cabinet members are going to be and select a progressive cabinet and the progressive candidates. I think that it's silly to not be drafting AOC. I mean, people don't realize that AOC is going to be turning 35 on October 13th of 2024. She is, everybody says, oh, she's too young. Does she even qualify? And we've got to resuscitate people like Russ Feingold, like everybody kind of says, oh, well, he lost the election in Wisconsin to millions of dollars coming in for Ron Johnson. And so therefore he's sort of out to pasture. That's not true at all. This is a guy, a 3-term, United States senator who was on the Judiciary Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, et cetera. We've got to get these people out to be candidates in 2024. The 2024 campaign is going to start on November 9th. The day after this midterm election, the 2024 campaign is going to be starting. And we've got to understand that we've got to be able to control the White House. We've got to have the White House. And in order to do that, we've got to mobilize the young people. And I think that AOC, we've got to undertake to draft her. She's not going to say, oh, well, I think I ought to run. People are going to consider that untoward, it's overambitious, etc. We've got to draft her, that we can get virtually 85% of the people that are below 30 years old who wouldn't even be voting. If we can get AOC as the candidate and mobilize a complete progressive cabinet behind her, select the people from the Progressive Caucus in the House of Representatives who have detailed information and skills in all these key areas, from defense to economics, to energy, to treasury, to everything, to mobilize these people and mount a full-scale progressive government in waiting. Have this be the island of stability in what's going to be otherwise a totally bizarre 2024 election, with people thinking that, well, maybe Trump is going to be the candidate for the Republican Party. Is he going to be indicted, by Merrick Garland? Is he going to be convicted in time? Is he going to be disqualified for being the candidate? Is Biden going to run, or is he not going to run? We've got to say, look at, we've got to mobilize the people to say, look at, we're not going to get trapped in all these vicissitudes. We're going to put forth a full-scale progressive government in waiting with president, vice president, secretary of state, secretary of defense. Put them forward and promulgate the progressive policies that have already been endorsed by the Progressive Caucus of the House of Representatives. Put forth a full-scale platform, which includes opposing nuclear power, reducing the military budget, withdrawing the military from all of these kind of imperial ventures that they're engaged in. Present to the young people of the world a vision, a comprehensive vision with candidates and details. This is what has to happen. And we have to start mobilizing this now. We've got to be in the field on November 9th, right after this election, and start campaigning right away for the 2024 presidential races and all of the key Senate races and House races. That's what I think we need to do.
Thank you, Danny. And I agree completely with what we need to do on November 9th and going forward. And I think you're right about bringing the voices of younger people who are more in touch with the needs of the time. And I also want to just stay on this topic of between now and November 8th. Enough. Your list, incidentally, Danny, that you put in of the key races and whatnot, that went to the panelists instead of to everyone.
Yeah.
If you could redo that. In the meantime, I want to keep reminding people that for all of the inadequacies, for all of the stupidities, for all of the places where money is misspent, the one thing that will still make a difference in November is enormous outpourings of voters. The more people who go to the polls, the more people who vote for candidates that are not in favor of the big lie, that are not moral cowards, that are not somehow or another creating havoc in our country, the better chance we have at least of preserving the status quo with the House, of increasing a couple of seats. Can you imagine what would have happened in the first 2 years had there been 2 more Democratic senators in Congress?
Well, we have Clinton and Obama to blame for that, because DC statehood has been on the table, and they could have made DC a state and given the Democrats 2 more seats, but they didn't do it. And so DC statehood remains one of the major missing pieces here.
That's true. And there are candidates that are currently running for the U.S. Senate that we can support and should be supporting. To think that Fetterman is running neck and neck to one of the biggest jerks running for office.
George, don't forget Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance in that sentence.
Absolutely. So we can make a difference, and it is massive turnout. And what Danny said at the beginning, which is for each one of us to call 5 people or 10 people who we know are either indifferent, sitting it out, or still somehow or another committed to voting for fools who are going to take us down rivers we don't want to go down. So I just want to keep stressing huge Democratic turnout in 2022. The other day, Wednesday, we had Emily Levy of Scrutineers on. And she said something so simple, so that I hadn't thought about when we think about the mechanics of elections. She suggested that each polling place is obligated to post their lists of the voting and what's occurred before the votes go to any central places, and that those lists are always available. And one of the things an average citizen can do is go and take photographs of those or videos of those lists. And there are places that can be turned into so that we can double check election counts. There are things each one of us can do. Yesterday, Jim Wallace, Faiths United, was talking about the fact that they're putting clergy in a lot of different polling places to counteract the negative impact that the other side is going to have trying to intimidate voters. These are things we can do. What else is on the table? Harvey.
Well, I want to very quickly bounce back to the nuclear issue, and just give me a minute here. Nuclear power is actually not the issue in energy. It's the reactors themselves. When people support nuclear power, they don't really know what they're doing here. We have 92 reactors in the United States. There are no more big reactors going to be built in the United States. You've got 2 left in the pipeline. They're coming in Georgia at over $30 billion, complete disaster. No one is ever going to build in this country. We have won this. No one is ever going to build another big nuclear plant. They also don't have in the immediate pipeline anything else. There's a lot of talk about small modular reactors. Those can't go online for at least 5 to 7 years. The history of the industry is it takes at least twice as long and costs twice as much. The earliest they're talking about new small reactors is 2029. So we have a 7-year window here where the only thing real that's going on with the nuclear issue is whether or not the old reactors, which are averaging 40 years of age now, 40 years old, whether these old reactors are going to stay on the road. And that's why the Diablo fight is so critical. You can support nuclear power all you want. I don't care. It's the closing of the old reactors that is the entirety of the issue at this point in time, with a sideshow for small reactors, but that's a long way away. And what we have going for us, and this is again a grassroots issue, is that solar and wind are totally blowing away the competition in the marketplace. Solar power is so much cheaper than nuclear, coal, oil, and even gas in many cases, that it's not even close anymore. And that's why the California fight, which is a grassroots fight, is so critical, is because they want to keep open these 2 reactors as a flagship for keeping open all the other old reactors until one blows up. That's the reality of the case. We are in a desperate fight here to shut each individual reactor before they blow up. That's what it's about. And that's why people like Linda, who are right there on the scene, grassroots, are so important. And it's the same with the elections.
I have to go. I've got a 9 o'clock that I have to be on. I've got like 50 people waiting for me to talk with them about the elections. So look, I love you dearly, but I have to go do this one right now, but don't let me stop you guys. Okay.
Thank you, Danny, and no nukes.
Thank you.
Great.
So I want to.
Let me just finish. The other thing we have been very aware of is we have to protect the election boards on a one-by-one basis. Steve Bannon has mobilized what can only be called a fascist army to intimidate voters and to rig the vote count and to get rid of secretaries of state. He knows exactly where the power is, which is at the casting and the counting of the ballots. And our grassroots organizing has to include having people who are committed to actual democracy at the election boards. And that is a very big deal. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Harvey. There's somebody in the chat that said when the Democrats are carrying out the plans of the World Economic Forum, why would it be important to vote for them? So I'll answer your question. As imperfect as they may be, The alternative is unacceptable. It's as simple as that. Yes, imperfect that this party is, as imperfect as some of their policies may be, the alternative, if you really want to know what the alternative is, it's unacceptable. And I keep encouraging you, please, all of the bogus other issues, the fact that gas prices are going up, oh, God bless me, that's the end of the world. Or the fact that corporations are rushing with greed to add to inflation.
Morning, everyone.
All
Good afternoon,
all
good
terrible
evening,
things.
Wherever you're finding us on this
Sorry about that.
wonderful day.
That's my
Day
fault.
325 on Humanity Rising. And now,
So
There you go.
these issues are inconsequential relative to the fundamental priority. That fundamental priority is keep the House, the Senate in the hands of the Democrats so we at least have a chance to do what Danny is suggesting, what Harvey and Linda are talking about. If we lose the House or the Senate, the next 2 years are going to be disastrous for all of the sub-issues. You are interested in social justice, in LGBT rights, in marriage equality, whatever your sub-issue is, it will not be advanced if we lose the House. So those 11 races that Danny talked about, please pay attention. If you have friends in those states, if there are grassroots organizations in those states, as Harvey has been talking about, that you can donate, that's the job. You got to keep your eye on the priority 30 days away. John?
John, you're muted.
Did.
There you go. George, is there a way we can see the full, I can't see the full gallery of everybody who's on the call. Is there a way we can do that?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Let's see all my peeps out there.
No, I,
Oh no,
No, you can't.
we don't see the people who are on the live chat.
Oh.
This is not that kind of program.
but Harvey, in answer to what George asked of me, so many people are faced with this sometimes competing, sometimes overlapping. I want to ask Linda, you and Harvey this question. Between the issue about which we're passionate and democracy and its survival. And clearly, Harvey, you and Linda are representing you do both. But given George's passionate request for what we do in the next few days, how do you guys hold in your own lives this creative tension, if you like, between the meta issue, but the specific issue that if we also don't work on that, it's catastrophic? Linda, why don't you go first?
Please.
Okay. I think about that a lot because the issue of nuclear power is one that's pretty distinct. You know, it's everybody isn't interested in it. It's really complicated. It's kind of boring. It's overwhelming. It's like there is so much to learn, and the opposition is so powerful. But it's a way of staying focused. It's like the million tiny darts into the heart of the beast. You know, we have to work together. It's not nuclear power. That's not the issue. It's not women's rights. It's not LGBTQ. It's everything. It's every single one of them. And so to come to these issues, whatever our heart brings us to, for whatever reason, which we don't know why we are drawn into a certain area that may seem ridiculous to other people. But if it's something that draws our interest, our passion, our intelligence, our compassion, our willingness to work hard, and our willingness to learn more and to, stretch ourselves. That's how we humans work. There are a million paths to the mountaintop, right? So whatever each one's path is, that's what we need to go on. And it's like we're all these, shining diamonds in Indra's net, and we need to reflect each other and support each other. That's what we are as humans, I think.
And we need to do it within the fabric of a system that allows us to do it.
That's
If
right.
we lose our inalienable rights, if we lose our right to vote, if we lose our right to be citizens, then none of these issues will have the support, the love, the commitment that we need to have.
Right.
That's why I say it's our number one priority. And I agree. After we serve our number one priority, then let our hearts call us to the things that we are most committed to.
Right.
Right. Unless people lose heart, I think that we're really on the cusp here of two gargantuan changes in our nation and in the world, and the transitions from power, of power. The first is from the big one, the really big one, is from men to women. Having studied indigenous societies, virtually all of the tribes in North America before the whites came were matriarchies. And the key one is the Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee in upstate New York, which was Ben Franklin and many of the white founders, the writers of the Constitution, were very, very well aware that the Iroquois Confederacy was extremely advanced and a basic democracy, and any shreds of democracy that found their way into the American Constitution and the early American society came from the Iroquois, and they were run by the women. And I saw a wonderful documentary, I say this wherever I can. There was a woman named Audrey Shenandoah, an Onondaga matriarch, and they asked her why it was that if the women ran the tribes, why were the men the chiefs? And she said, well, it makes them feel important and it gives them something to do. So, and this, of course, the majority of the electorate in the United States is now women. It has been since 1920. And, we have Roe v. Wade and we have all these other things going on. Women are taking control. We've had 5,000 years of male domination. Hasn't worked out too well. The other major transition is generational. Now, we baby boomers, we did revolutionize the culture. I won't go into the detail, but we all know, many of us can tell you how different it is firsthand. We can tell you how different it is today from the 1950s. A lot of things we take for granted. We're one in the 60s in the Cultural Revolution. What we were not able to do is end the empire. And that is what the transition to the millennials and the Zoomers is about. And as I said, the majority of the American electorate, as it is now female, is also now born after 1980. And many of the issues that divided people, race, gender, sexual orientation, these things no longer matter as anywhere near as much to these new generations. So we can get down to the nitty gritty. And what is the nitty gritty? In the nuclear issue, it's the individual reactors. Nuclear power is not the issue. The reactors are the issue. And the same thing is true. Are we socialists? Well, let's answer that question. Do we support a universal health care? Do we support an end to homelessness, end to poverty? Saving the environment, organic agriculture. These are the issues. It's not the big issue of socialism versus capitalism. It's the one by one issues that matter in people's lives. And those are the things we need to discuss.
So Harvey, what I hear you saying in answer to George's question, or at least my follow on to George's question, and Linda, you're saying the same thing. This is a both and world, and we have to do both at the same time.
And it's the same thing with the Democrats.
Yes,
It's okay. We got to support the big D Democrats more or less.
and
But the big D Democratic Party has to become a small D party.
I
or
agree.
we're screwed.
So in these last few minutes, George, should we bring Jim back on, or you going to?
Yeah, I just
ask
want
another question
before
first?
we do, I just want to say that, Jim's tee-up and his exploration of, the sins of the past, the qualities of character and whatnot that all need to be addressed, the redefinition, the redefinement of the structure of democracy, all of that, we haven't even been able to touch at all in this conversation. But that's the conversation that can begin with much more vigor and much more enthusiasm after November 8th, if we do our jobs between now and then. I couldn't endorse more the things that need to be done to make democracy better, more inclusive, new generational, new conceptual. But that's a whole different thing. But we started with a broad scope from Jim. We narrowed it down to the November question. That's still a priority in my mind. And then let's take on the real work that lies ahead to make democracy what it was designed to be instead of what it has become. Jim?
Yeah, I agree completely. My remarks, commemorating something that happened 530 years ago were sort of a synchronistic context. But I think George is correct, and all of you, that what's going to happen on November 8th is seminal and highly consequential. And we need to hold both the systemic issues and the immediate, I would say, tactical issues to ensure that we at least have the possibility of keeping the conversation alive and vibrant as we make, as Sluggo, you were saying, these generational changes.
Right.
And I loved what Danny said of everybody, getting together on beginning November 9th and starting to draft a younger generational transition in the Democratic Party and among the progressives to really keep the flame alive and moving forward, carried more firmly by the young. That feels to me to be an urgent imperative.
Jim, I want you, if you can, please, to come on our Zoom call with everybody else on Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific time. We need to hear about that indigenous dialogue that occurred in the 1680s. If you can join us, I'd appreciate it. And if you'd put the name of that indigenous thinker in the chat, I would appreciate that. I will send you the link. So please join us on Monday, and everybody else. Again, it's the Gree Zoom Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition, where we've been doing these issues for more than 2 years. I'm going to throw in there really quickly a teaser for people. I'm not going to discuss it in great detail, but another unknown source of democracy in our culture was the pirates. And in Nassau, in the Bahamas, where Columbus landed, actually in the parts of the 1700s, became a social democracy because the major empires, the British, the French, and the Spanish, had hired buccaneers to rob each other at sea. And when they made peace, these guys were, and they were all, well, there were women too, actually, Anne Bonny. There were a few women who were major in this movement. The pirates became independent buccaneers, and they actually freed thousands of slaves by taking over slave ships. And for a period of about 50 years, Nassau in the Bahamas, near where Columbus landed, was actually the closest thing we've had in white society to a social democracy. And it wasn't just white society. About a third of the buccaneers, the pirates, were black. And these Johnny Depp movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, are ridiculous. There's really serious stuff we need to learn about the pirates. I couldn't resist throwing that in there.
That's beautiful.
We can discuss it in detail again on Monday. But Joe, I'm going to put you down to join us on Monday to discuss this. We're also talking about an intentional community of indigenous that's going to be started in upstate New York. But we have to, and the key we face now with the Democratic Party, which has been driving us crazy since the 1980s, since the Clintons sold the Democratic Party to the corporations, is it has to be converted from the capital D Democratic Party to a small d democracy movement. And it would be generational, and it will be gender-based. And that's, you have to look at from the opposite side, from the Steve Bannon and the big corporations. They're hanging on by a fingernail. Just like we're hanging on to our democracy by a fingernail, they are looking at a tsunami that's about to wash them away. That is female and that is generational. And as I say, the difference between Germany in 1933 and America in 2023 is that we have the majority on our side. The United States, for all its faults, does have a democratic tradition, small d, rooted in the indigenous, who were not wiped out. That's one of the great myths. Oh, we wiped out the Indians. No, we did not wipe out the indigenous. They are still very much here. They are still leading our movements. They're still teaching us about the ecology and about feminism. And here we are today. So as desperate as it looks for us, it's equally desperate for them. We are really on the cusp here. We're on the cusp in energy with the takeover, which is hugely important in every aspect of our lives, because solar has succeeded in ways that we could not have imagined 50 years ago. If you had described solar technology today at the Toward Tomorrow Fair in Amherst, Massachusetts, which was pivotal in 1975, if you would have said this is what solar is going to be in 2023, it would have been completely unrealistic. They would have laughed at us. There was a guy at this panel, and I'll be very quick, who proposed a 5 megawatt offshore wind machine. His name was William Hieronymus. People laughed at him. They said he was a gyro gurus. We now have General Electric manufacturing 15 megawatt offshore windmills. And the power we have won this economic discussion in energy. They are hanging on by a fingernail. They've got nothing to sell. They're pushing reactors that are on earthquake faults, for God's sakes. And so we can push them off the cliff, and we can push the Steve Bannons of the world off the cliff too. We need to remember how powerful we are. We know how to do it. It was shown in Georgia in 2021, and we just got to make it happen now.
Thank you, Harvey. Jim?
Well, I think that what Harvey's saying needs to be underscored. And Harvey, we had a guy on yesterday, Rich Seislick, who was an evangelical at the highest echelons of the National Evangelical Association. And he was saying that the number of evangelicals in the last, I think it was 10, 15 years has dropped from 20% to only 13%. And he says the polling within that 13% is showing that a third of those are kind of go along without conviction evangelicals. So you're absolutely right. They're losing the demographic battle. The reality is that most of America now is non-white. Women are 53% of the population. The voters are overwhelmingly, I would say, centrist progressive in agreeing with the major points about welfare, about gun control, about abortion, and so forth and so on. And so the Steve Bannons of the world are really clinging by their fingernails to the instrumentality of power, which they're using increasingly as coercive force against women, against voters of color, et cetera, et cetera. But that dam is about ready to burst.
Exactly.
And so that's an important point, I think, with which to conclude our week, everyone. We're closer to victory than we imagine. But we have to hang on too. We've got to hang on too, man. And so Linda, why don't you give us a final word from your deep experience? Linda is going to be celebrating 50 years, like Sluggo, 50 years of no nukes next year, 50 years of Mothers for Peace, and the fight, really more recently to retire Diablo Canyon nuclear reactor. So Linda, just give us a final comment.
This has been so wonderful for me to hear, especially to hear Danny Sheehan's vision. When he was talking about it, all my hair was standing on end.
Yeah, we noticed.
We can just make it through here and hold fast and understand that, like my mom used to say, it's always darkest before the dawn, right?
Right.
So here we are, and we're on the brink of something. We don't know what it is. And, I guess it's now or never, do or die.
That was a great song back in the 50s.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thanks for
John,
allowing me to be on with you.
John, do you want to have a final comment then, George?
I like what Linda said. I think of course, it's hard to resist a final comment, isn't it? We're all in this together. We're all learning to hold the polarities and the creative tensions. We're all, I think, learning to live both in uncertainty and a willingness to be more pragmatic and real. And we're all doing the best we can for November. And I just want to thank you, Jim and George, for not only making today possible. Yes, we brought some folks onto these dialogues, Margot and I did, but the platform that you're offering us and the people who are watching this, and your vision to take this platform to many, many more people, to me is as inspiring as the content of what we're doing, because more people are going to be able to see conversations like this and so many more important ones going forward. So bless both of you and the teams behind you. And it has been a privilege for Margot and me this year. I think this is our 4th or 5th week to be part of all of this.
Thank you, John. And thanks to Margot. Give her our love and warm regards.
She's listening. She's watching.
George, final comment.
Thanks, Jim, and John and Margot both. Sincere gratitude. My final comment is really simple. Go into the quiet of your heart. Listen to that place inside of you that knows truth, even in the middle of the noise. When you make that decision to put an X or a circle or you pull a lever, pull it with your heart. There is no issue more important than the issue that preserves your access to inalienable rights and privileges. They are narrowed, and they will be more narrowed if we do not vote with our hearts. It's the best we can do. So please do that.
Thank you, George. Thank you, John. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sluggo. It's just been wonderful and inspiring. And I think this has been a perfect ending to a 5-day program on the challenges of democracy, the crisis of democracy, and the opportunity that the citizens of the United States have on November 8th to preserve democracy and expand the franchise and vitalize the meaning of a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. Thank you, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week for another 5-day program on regenerative health and how through very simple practices, each one of us can vitalize our bodies, our souls, our minds in a way that is very easy, very practical, and extraordinarily effective. So that's a 5-day program on regenerative health. See you Monday. Bye for now.
In Solartopia.
See you at Solartopia.